Regardless of how she got here, Sally knew Mark had never been an intentionally evil or cruel person. He just had that inability of the super rich to understand that just because he desired something did not give him the right to take it. Although she still occasionally tasted the odd flare of rage about how Mark got her into this, she had to admit there were more than a few compensations. What with her financial and material gains combined with surprisingly the physical delights, she knew she had not done that badly out of Mark. Thinking about with how long they had known each other, she was not surprised by what he did. He had always been arrogant, insensitive, and self-centered bastard. Jesus, Mark, why do you always attract the wrong sort of attention? Sam, who enjoyed being Emma on weekends, muttered as he read the front page of the tabloid rag left on the cafeteria table. For the tabloid press, the lifestyles of people like Sam's oldest friend were a cash cow, and with the company Mark had been keeping lately, he was in them all too often. Why Mark found it shocking that his exes talked to the press after he split with them was beyond Sam's ken. Ever since Mark's computer games took over the world, he had been photographed dating a succession of high-profile beauties who never in a million years would have been seen with him when he was just footballer wealthy. Unknown to Sam, the main reason why Mark dated glamour models was to alleviate any awkward questions, because deep down Mudguard Mark was still as confused about his sexual orientation as he was when had been as a teenager. Having remained close to Sam since childhood, as he became wealthy he had, without realizing it, tended to treat his boyhood mate like the reliable old girlfriend he never had. Not that Sam noticed. He had known Mark for that long, he was used to his strange ways and did not recognize how he was behaving until his flatmate Jenny told him a couple of years before our story begins. Sometimes you are so bloody dense. When a guy picks you up in his brand new red Ferrari and whisks you out to a fancy dinner, he's after something, usually his oats, she rudely giggled. So did he? No, Sam said, blushing at her comment. Well, I would have, she said. His car says he's loaded, then dinner at a riverside restaurant, and with the way he was looking at you. I'm telling you, he's got the horn for you, babe. Rubbish, Jen, that's just Mark, Sam said. He's always been like that. Balls, honey. My gaydar was twitching like a virgin on her wedding night. Be thankful he's a bit of a slob, otherwise you would have been fighting off every pretty boy in the place, Jenny teased. Gay. Mark? Sam said. You've got be joking? How often am I wrong? Jenny said. With me for starters, Sam said. You thought I was gay, and I'm not, am I? True, but close enough since you're a very girly tranny, she countered, and one who's told me often enough that you wished you were a girl. Her eyes bubbled delightedly, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but don't girls date boys, sweetie? Well, yeah. Sam conceded. But I'm not a real girl, am I? Ha. Sometimes you could fool me. Unlike Mark, who still deeply repressed his sexual confusion, Sam found art school liberated him, allowing him to come to terms with his desires. Dressing alone and badly in his bedsit, he found the crazy eroticism of his early experiments faded until dressing became his highly sensual means of relaxing. In the hedonistic atmosphere of a university art college, he found it surprisingly easy to shed enough of his embarrassments about being a tranny to answer an advert on the LGBT group notice board. By Femme Seeks Flatmate. F or TG, full or part-time, preferred. Call Jenny on 0102-345-9876. Jenny was a bubbly red-headed post-grad who took to Sam like a magnet when they met in the canteen. Although dressed as a boy, there was a feminine quality about Sam that got him the room. She liked his shy willingness to experiment and soon became fast friends, showing him how to improve his feminine alter ego and helping him experience the joys of public dressing while he was still young enough to pass without notice. While Sam was whooping it up at university and then the Royal College of Art, Mark began to lose touch with the real world. Completely focused on writing the perfect game, he did not really notice his self-publishing experiment burgeoned into first a small business and then a mind-bogglingly successful international software house. As Sam's student years rolled past, it was hardly surprising that Mark eventually began to drift away from him. With the money and first-class service everywhere, Mark's lived in a totally different world. He had the pick of the single women in the celebrity media, and the once regular get-together weekends became more occasional and entirely on Mark's terms. Success, flash women and money did not automatically provide everything, and behind the bling Mark was a lonely and unhappy man who avoided the truth by partying and working. Eventually, the endless succession of 16-hour working days and party lifestyle began to catch up with him. Always unusually fit for a nerd, he stopped exercising and began to put weight on as his diet deteriorated to junk food and thick black coffee. No matter how good a constitution you have, the body can only take so much, and by the time he was in his mid-20s he was on the verge of a total physical and mental burnout. For 10 years solid, Mark had more than burned the candle at both ends, designing, writing, and publishing a succession of bestsellers that almost incidentally built Mudguard Games into a brand name that attracted the interest of the big fish. Emotionally unable to come to terms with his desires and sick of being taken for a ride by ruthless women, Mark was reduced to buying human company when he needed it, which given his increasingly workaholic lifestyle was rarely. Fat and unfit. Mark's appearance shocked Sam when saw him for the first time since his mother's funeral the previous year. After slap-up meal followed by a few beers, he had no qualms about giving his friend a right mouthful, ending with, "If your mom could see you now." Other than a few ex-girlfriends in the press, no one had spoken or criticized him in years, and Mark did not like it. He was halfway through a withering put-down when Sam said, "What on earth are you doing, man?" His face was flushed with worry and his eyes sparkled with exasperation. "You need a break or to get out." "Fuck it. Look at yourself, you're in the papers every other sodding month for all the wrong reasons. Some ex from a couple of years ago writes a book about shagging the wealthy and bang, you're back in the papers, and what do? Sam banged his glass on the table. "You hang a bloody glamour model on your arm and get fucked over again by another gold digger in the press. Shit, man, you've made more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Why bother doing all that if all you're going to do is carry on like this? Hell, you'll be dead in 10 years. Look, you daft twat. You're all I've got left resembling family, and I don't want to lose you." Having not seen Sam for a while, Mark at last really looked at his friend and noticed a few subtle changes. He was dressing differently, and his long hair was somewhat lighter and better kept than Mark recalled. In Sam's ears he could see the empty holes signifying a double-pierced ears, and later as he thought about it in his hotel room the impression reignited a few long-forgotten dark desires. In the process it also made him take a long look at himself, and Mark did not like what he saw. Even so, he was sure Sam was wrong about his health. He was fit as a butcher's dog, and just need to lose a little weight. But that would have to wait as he had important commitments and deadlines he had to meet. Pissed off at Sam for ruining their weekend with his badgering, and yet once Mark was back at work he once again found himself wanting to hook up with him whenever he was in London. It got him away from a world of meetings and the stresses of getting his latest bestseller released. Sooner or later it had been bound to happen, and a couple of days after a launch party Mark keeled over. Coming to in a plush private hospital, he was again told that his lifestyle was killing him. Only this time it came from a very serious-looking doctor, who had the CAT scans to prove it. She did not hide anything, and gave Mark her stark reading of his future if he did not change his ways. Normally a taciturn, closed-mouthed, grumpy bloke whose poor people's skills were tolerated simply because Mark was brilliant, the doctor knew she was in for a fight to get him doing what she wanted. In the end it was a battle she never had to fight, because when Sam arrived at the hospital he felt no constraints about holding his tongue. Mark could not believe his eyes or ears. Sam was usually so contained and agreeable even when he was telling him off. To see him blowing his stack came as quite a shock. Sure, he had twittered and twined about Mark's physical condition, but never like this. The sight of his fearful exasperation gave Mark a warm thrill, opening a chink of a possibility in his mind. "What did I fucking tell you?" For a good while Sam's eyes flashed as he let rip his frustration and worry. It was enough that the nurse was about to step in until the doctor, whose session Sam's arrival interrupted, tapped her on the shoulder and shook her head, mouthing, "We'll be fine, go?" The nurse nodded and slipped out. Belatedly Sam noticed the doctor and said, "Oh, sorry. Air?" Please, the doctor said, continue. She smiled. It would appear that he is actually listening to you. Oh. So what's he done to himself? Sam asked, adding with another blush. I'm Sam and that. He nodded to Mark's prone form, is the closest thing to a family I've got. Sam's my emergency contact of number and next of kin, Mark said, adding as the doctor started to quote the patient confidently line, so you may as well as spare me the trouble, and tell him doctor. As the doctor repeated her unvarnished assessment of Mark's health, he was watching Sam in thrilled astonishment. As the doctor spoke, he could see his friend's bright blue eyes flashing with a strange mixture of fury, worry, and something else perhaps. Mark was bright enough to know he was probably reading more than was there, but what the hell, it was something, and that was a start. You're a Class A fuckwit, Mark. Jesus, you've the money of Midas, and what do you eat? Junk food, Sam said, relaxing a little. The shock of getting called and told that he had collapsed filled him with dark fears as he dashed back from a painting trip on Anglesey. Having been harangued by Sam for almost half an hour, barely getting a word in, Mark held up his arms in surrender. All right. I give in. What have I got to do? The doctor told him, and Mark did not like the sound of it one bit. When you say avoid stress. I run a business and write games. I cannot take 6 months off completely. Look, this time it was just your body telling you to slow down. Do what I say now and you'll be back at work in a year better than before. Ignore me and in a couple of years or so you'll be in that bed with a ventilator down your neck getting over your first heart attack. All right, Mark said dubiously. Recognizing that Mark was going to ignore the doctor's advice about taking a long break from work, Sam snapped. I know you, Mark. When they let you out of here, I'm in half a mind to move in for 6 months and make damn sure you do exactly what the doctor said. Promise? Mark said hopefully. If means it keeps you on the doctor's straight and narrow, yeah. Even before he was out of hospital, the real world came crashing down on Mark's head. News of his collapse brought the corporate vultures circling, raising the question of what if he sold out his majority share? One thing was for sure, after Sam rammed the doctor's stark warning down his throat a couple of times, Mark was starting to question why he worked so hard. They said he needed a minimum of half a year's complete rest before he began to contemplate working. And after a half year, would he want to go back? If he sold up now while Mudguard was at number 1, the amount his tiny company was worth would make all his staff, from the office cleaners to his highly paid PA, multimillionaires, ensuring their futures while catapulting him into the realm of hyper-wealthy. After discussing it with his company lawyers and accountants, Mark teleconferenced from his hospital bed a staff meeting and put the idea to his 40-odd staff. Once they all heard what they stood to get out of the sale, they all voted yes, and Mark was committed. He was going to sell the business. Mark thought it would be a painful decision, but in the end it was easy. Especially as his agile mind was now examining a more personal goal. Watching all the business dealings from the sidelines, Sam felt like an observer in a world he did not understand when he visited Mark. Jenny, who had been watching their dance for years, made no secret of what she thought he should do. He's your best friend, love, and although you think it's bull, I'm damned sure he's a repressed by guy who fancies the ass off you. Hell, jump on the gravy train and make the most of it, honey. I would. Sam waved to his skirted reflection. I know, like dressing and looking like a girl, but I'm attracted to girls, Jen, not blokes. You know that? So, Jenny chortled, do you honestly think that the girls who were in papers hanging on his arm actually cared for him? Course they don't, they put up with being with him 'cause he's loaded, she grinned. Hell, I'm same, and call me a whore if you want, but what attracted me to Dave was knowing he could afford to keep me in the style I want to become accustomed to. Yeah. But you're a girl. And you're not, Jenny asked, eyeballing Sam's appearance. As much a lesbian as I am? It would be wrong. Why? It's not like you don't love him, Jenny said. Sure, it's not quite the kind of love I think Mark wants from you, but it's enough of a start, especially if you see it as way of getting a studio you've always wanted and have every perk Emma could ever imagine, designer clothes, shoes, the full WAG treatment. But I like being a bloke. Do you? She asked, honestly. Sam blushed. Well, mostly? Mostly is not an answer, it's an excuse, Jenny said. Look, Jen, it's not like I'm moving in with him. This is only for a couple of months until he sorts himself out, Sam reiterated. So you say now. Jenny giggled, before saying, well, we best be off or we'll be late for your leaving due. Jesus, Mark. Sam grumbled, looking round at the chaos behind the door of Mark's impressive-looking home. Since Mark was being let out of hospital the following lunchtime after 10 days of tests and a fortnight of rehab, Sam drove over early to air out the place and remove any temptations. The mess was overwhelming, and it was pretty clear that Mark had not been looking after himself or his home for a long time. After going through the place with a fine-tooth comb, removing all the fizzy pop, chocolate and unhealthy treats while furiously cleaning, he eventually had the place cleaned up to the point that the kitchen, bathrooms, living room and 2 of the bedrooms were clean enough to live in. One look round the doors was enough to avoid Mark's bedroom and the attic office, which looked like a disaster area of official-looking papers. After a month of enforced clean living, Mark was looking forward to getting home and having a big pizza with all the trimmings to get rid of the taste of hospital food. A hope that was dashed when he got home to find Sam waiting with a fridge full of rabbit food and a cupboard full of unsatisfying healthy things. Watcha, Mark said, astonished to find his kitchen gleaming. All week he had wondering what he would say when he had Sam living under his roof, and almost kicked himself when he joked, looking round, had the maid's outfit out Sammy? Someone had to. Sam growled, why on earth with your money didn't you just hire a cleaner? Didn't think about it, Mark grinned. God, sometimes you're a prat, Mark. Sam laughed, handing him a mug. Here, and it's real tea, not that herbal stuff. Thanks, Mark grinned, adding as he waved at the kitchen. You didn't have to, you know. Sam shrugged. Sorry, but that's bull. You know it as well as I do. I can't live in a pigsty. Do I? Mark said with a grin. Yeah. Sam said, waving to the lounge. You only asked me round to stay when we were kids 'cause you knew I'd tidy your bloody room. Now go light the fire. Jesus. Having you here's going to be worse than having a bloody wife, Mark joked, scurrying off before Sam saw the sudden flash of longing in his face. Having met Sam's longtime flatmate Jenny numerous times, over the next couple of days Mark saw something of her personality and behavior had rubbed off on him, lending his body language a deliciously feminine edge. Oddly, for all that he did not like what he was being made to do, Mark did weirdly enjoy having Sam enforcing his restricted diet and exercise plan. With Sam cracking the whip, Mark began to feel fitter, and as the weight started to come off, he found he actually liked sharing his home with someone. In the past, having anyone in the house for more than a couple of days had become highly irritating, and now he found he liked getting home to company. Not that he spent much time awake, after his daily 5-mile jog walks, and 3-hour afternoon sessions in the gym and pool. For the first couple of weeks he was usually shattered. As Mark adapted to the new healthy regime, he felt sure that he was pissing Sam off somehow. He was not his usual self, he seemed grumpy and out of sorts. The more Mark thought about what could be pissing him off, the surer he was about why. But how to broach the subject? He did not have the gall to just ask his closest friend if he was a transvestite, mainly because Mark was scared of what he might blab if Sam answered yes. Mark needed a plan, but how on earth could he bring it up in the first place? That issue ended one afternoon about 6 weeks after Sam moved in, and Mark was supposed to have been out all afternoon. Getting back a couple of hours early, he caught Sam sunbathing in a bikini with a glossy magazine. For a moment he could not believe his eyes when he realized he was looking at the confirmation he had dreamed of. Seeing that she was oblivious to his presence, Mark snapped a couple of just-in-case photos with his phone and snuck back out to buy a bottle or 3 of champagne. Never one to do anything without a plan, Mark's speculative desire had developed enough to have planned a timetable of events if the opportunity presented itself. Cycling down to the village and back, praying that Samantha had not changed, Mark was relieved to see her still sunbathing, oblivious to his presence. Making sure he kept out of her field of view, Mark walked over and tapped Sam on the shoulder with a glass of orange, saying, "Here?" "Oh my God!" Sam almost jumped out of his skin at Mark's touch. flushing white with horror as he pulled off his headphones and grabbed a towel, almost screaming as he said, "What the fuck are you doing back?" My fitness instructor had to cancel at the last minute, and since I'm feeling knackered from this morning first full circuit jogging, I did my 30 lengths in the pool and came home. He grinned and added, "Don't look at me like that. I've been good and I did my swimming." Seeing that Sam was going to go run, Mark grabbed his arm and said, "Relax. For a split second when I got home I didn't realize it was you, and I'm not surprised to see you dressed like that." "Hell," he laughed. "I've been expecting something like this since you moved in." "Oh." Sam blushed, going bright red, realizing that he was well and truly busted and might as well as get the explanations over with. "So you know I'm a tranny then?" "Yeah, I always thought I'd catch you in a dress sooner or later. Never thought it would be a bikini though." Mark grinned, adding a little white lie. "I've known for years that you liked being a girl ever since you played Juliet at school." Sam's face was red as beetroot, and for a few seconds, feeling like he was about to burst into tears, he looked at Mark blankly before croaking, Why didn't you say something?" "Didn't have the bottle," Mark said, adding with a sly whistle, "Wish I had now, 'cause you make that bikini look very good." He jokingly waggled his eyes, adding, "So don't change just because I'm back." Something in Mark's expression brought Jenny's words back about the perks of available if Sam showed his feminine side. The last month or so had been hard. He had been used to spending most of his free time as Emma, and missed being her. Now he was staying with Mark. Inside his head he could almost hear Jenny saying, "Go girl," as he wavered and eventually said with a shrug, "If you want." "I do," Mark said with a wink. "So come on, fess up, when did you really start dressing?" "First year at college," Sam said, briefly explaining how he dressed in his bedsit until he moved in with Jenny and how she encouraged him to free his transgendered side. Listening, Mark felt the shoot of an idea that would keep Sam dressed, and patting himself on the back for bothering to buy the paper, he bided his time before saying, "You know, this might be a good way to keep me discreet," Mark said, allowing his face to crease with faint worry. "The tabloid papers have been getting curious again since my name hit the rich list. It's nothing overt yet, but you know how they are, and I don't think I'd like the way they would present your presence if they got a photo of you like this, and you weren't dressed in that bikini." "Like what?" "Half-naked sunbathing together in a private walled garden," Mark said. Mark knew he had scored a good hit with that and let Sam mull it over before suggesting, "But with you wearing that bikini, the feminine impression you're giving," he grinned and mock buffed his nails. "In their minds they expect a bloke of standing to have a girl around, and if they see I have one they won't look any deeper so long as I keep my head down, which, having almost quit, should be fairly easy. Sorry?" Sam said. "Start that again, will you?" "It's pretty simple really," Mark said. "A rich fat bloke living with a cute unnamed guy who doesn't have a job as Gossip Magazine gold, while that same rich fat bloke living with an unnamed girl who doesn't have a job isn't. Don't ask me why, but if I want to keep my name out of the gossip pages, having you around as a Samantha is a good start." "Oh God, I've never thought about it that way," Sam said, feeling his mouth go dry when he realized the press Mark was talking about was the kind of magazine he was reading. If there was one thing that truly horrified him at the thought of being plastered on over a tabloid papers. Yeah, weird, isn't it? A kept woman is a girlfriend, a kept male mate is automatically labeled a live and rent boy. Before Sam could answer that, Mark pulled a paper from his bag saying, "Seen this?" He tossed the paper on Sam's chest. "Look in the lifestyle supplement." The supplement contained a gossipy rundown of the year's rich list, highlighting wealth, availability, and background. Mark's entry at number 25 was short and to the point. Mark Bailey, 26 games designer and businessman, 66 million plus investments of an undisclosed amount. Single, no known partner, availability rating A1. Believed to own a Thames-side apartment and a manor house in Aston Burley. The comment from the paper's gossip columnist was a mysteriously low-placed entry in the list given the rumored sale of Mudguard Games. Until a recent suspected heart attack, Mudguard Mark was a regular on the London party circuit with a checkered history and poor reputation in matters in the bedroom, but well worth hooking if you're not choosy. See what I mean? Mark said. Yeah, Sam said, feeling a cold chill running down his back. Do you think they'll be really interested in me? Is the Pope a Catholic? Mark said. Mary, his PA, said the press have been burning the phone lines at work asking if I'll give them an interview since High Ground hit. She's been fobbing them off by telling them what the docs said. And will you? Eventually, yeah. But not for a while, Mark self-consciously laughed. Do you have to? Sam asked apprehensively. No, but if I go to them for the interview I can dictate to whom, and to a degree what they write. Sam nodded, seeing the logic, saying perhaps you're right. No perhaps about it, Mark grinned. Sooner or later the papers will get curious about what I'm doing, and one way or another they find a story. If I go to them after my rehab I can head off anything about having been in a gay relationship with you. But we're not in a gay relationship. That's not what they would say though, Mark said bleakly. And they'll print it praying I'll go to court, as that will just let sell more papers with me plastered on the front page. He shyly grinned at Sam, adding. Or I can just mention Sam, describing her as a girl I know from home who's offered to be my housekeeper cum therapy enforcer who doesn't want her face in the papers. If I say her name enough and allude, I'm hoping for more, they'll be curious but have to respect her right to privacy. Sam half laughed. Sure you've not planned this? Mark held his breath, praying he would not have to risk giving his game away trying to refute the allegation before Sam said. You know Jenny swears blind that you're gay. Adding when he misread Mark's guilty face, oh, and laughed. Look, relax Mark, after what they did to Max, Jenny wouldn't tell the press a damn thing other than maybe fuck off. Needing to get things in the open, Sam took the direct approach and added. So come on, you know my secret. Are you gay? I don't know, Mark admitted after his face went every shade it could. I've never been in a sexual relationship I enjoyed, which I did not pay for in advance. And were you paying boys, girls, or both? Yeah, Mark's brighter blush said it all. He had used both types of prostitutes before his face became known, and Mark prayed Sam misread the real cause of his blushes. During a business trip to Thailand he came to understand that his tastes were towards attractive preoperative male to female transsexuals, but he sure was not going to tell Sam that, not yet at any rate. Look, I'm a tranny, that's all, and I don't know if I could pull off being femme full-time, Sam said, trying not to look too excited about being able to dress openly. But if you think it would be for the best, I'll let her out for a couple of days and play it your way and see how it goes, okay? Promise? Mark chuckled. Why not? Sam smiled. I've kind of missed being a girl the last couple of weeks and have always wanted to see what it would be like to have to live as one for an extended period. You don't say? Mark teased. I kind of like Sally as a name. I go by Emma, Mark, Sam said. Well, I prefer Sally, Mark said, and now you've calmed down it's pretty clear from how comfortable you are dressed in that bikini. I'm guessing Emma is not a secret personality? Sam laughed. Yes, you could say that. Then if you go by Emma, sooner or later the press will find out, Mark said with a bleak expression on his face. If there is one thing I have learned about the press, it's they always dig up the dirt. So perhaps a change of name and look might be advisable? Mark knew he had scored a good hit with his unvarnished assessment of the press and added with a mischievous grin. And anyway, since you're going to be my kept woman for a while, I'm going to call you Sally. Whatever, Sam said with a shrug, realizing that he was not in the mood for an argument, and asked, so other than a housekeeper, what are you really getting out this? Camouflage, Mark said, deciding to be honest at least to a point. If you're seen out and about as Sally, it won't raise the kind of questions that will be asked if it got out that I've been living with a bloke for a month. Chatting about how they could avoid getting noticed, Sam's intended 2.5 hours sunning in his bikini with lots of sunblock became afternoons basting that left clear evidence on his skin of what he had been wearing. Blushing like mad when Mark teased when she went to shower and get dinner ready. You've got cracking tan lines on your shoulders, going to show them off over dinner, Sal? It felt a little odd to be dressing as Emma in Mark's house when he was home, and Sam found himself asking numerous silent questions as selected his outfit and began to dress. Without consciously realizing he was doing it, Sam wanted Mark to see Emma at her best and went a little overboard. Spending an hour messing with his hair and makeup, wearing only his corset, stockings, silicone boobs, matching bra and panties. Making sure he did not muss himself, Sam carefully slipped into his little black dress and stiletto heels, pleased at the image he saw in the bedroom mirror. With a final check of his appearance and a quick prayer that he did not make a total fool out of himself, Sam turned to the door and almost walked straight into Mark. Whistling to himself, Mark was just coming out of the bathroom when he saw Sally coming out of her room. Gasping when she saw him gawping at her, Mark saw her face blanch before she said with a blush, "Well, fucking hell, Sally." Mark gasped. "You look... wow. You approve then?" Sam asked, giving him a twirl. "Approve? Fuck yeah." Mark knew he had to calm down, and prayed that his towel was heavy enough to conceal his suddenly interested cock. Looking like that no scumbag journalist in their right minds would think you being here as anything other than appropriate. "Wow, nice legs, Sally." "I still prefer Emma, Mark," Sam said with a smile, aware that he would probably lose the argument. Mark's eyes were trawling over his body in a way that made Sam feel both embarrassed and pleased. Passing as a real female was always a thrill, and having someone telling him how good he looked was nicer. The stairs were kind of steep in 4-inch heels, but Sam was used to them enough to make it down without incident. Pulling an apron over his dress, he quickly made the dinner and on impulse decided to lay the table. Calling in his best girly voice, "Mark, dinner?" Sam was surprised when he walked in, also dressed for dinner in a smart bespoke suit, silk shirt and designer tie. Grinning boyishly at Sam's quizzical expression, Mark said, "Since you dressed up for me, the least I could do was the same." "Oh, but you didn't have to?" Sam said, feeling surprisingly pleased that Mark had gone to the trouble. "Sorry to contradict a lady, but I did," Mark grinned. After 2 months of enforced dieting and exercise, it was quite a thrill to get into an Armani suit he had not been able to wear for a couple of years. "Now what's for dinner, Sal?" Before adding rhetorically, "Let me guess, boiled chicken, with salad and fresh greens?" "Almost." Sam laughed. "Chicken and leek pie tonight." "Now don't shout at me, Sally, but I think this." Mark opened the fridge and produced the bottle of bubbly from the wine chillier box. "Would be appropriate given that we've a deal to seal." "Deal?" Sam said, biting his tongue. He did not really think Mark should be drinking yet, but he had been good and the doctors had said that a little booze in moderation could be a good thing. "Yeah," Mark grinned, "our deal about you living as Sally for the foreseeable future until I go back to some sort of work." He made a point of not saying a couple of days. "Oh, that," Sam said, carrying their dinner to the table as Mark popped the bottle with a flourish. "Yes, that," Mark said, politely holding Sam's chair before pouring 2 glasses of the expensive wine. Handing Sam a glass, he picked up his wine and said, "Now do we have a deal?" "Why not?" Sam said, touching his glass to Mark's. "It's a deal." "You know, Sally, that was lovely." Mark grinned sometime later, "and this has to be one of the nicest evenings I had since I moved here." Settling back with a cup of coffee after they had eaten, he gazed at the feminine face over the table and added with a laugh, "We should have done this years ago." "Maybe?" Sam said, pushing his hair back with an unconsciously feminine 2-handed flip. Mark had behaved like a total gentleman towards him, and Sam rather enjoyed having his chair held, wine poured, and being treated as a girl by his old school mate. "No maybe about it," Mark grinned. Swapping secrets and stories, Sam colored in what he had already told, while in return heard how Mark got himself into the mess he was in. It was an eye-opening evening, but one that ended early when Sam said, "You best be off to bed, Mark. It's midnight and you've got to go to London and see that greasy lawyer chap in the morning." Feeling disappointed yet ecstatic, Mark reluctantly agreed and sloped off to bed, wishing he had the guts to give her a goodnight kiss, while pleased that he didn't, as he knew any move in that direction would probably scare Sam off. telling himself to calm down and give Sam a little time to get used to being Sally around him before nudging her to the next step. Mark had to be up at ungodly o'clock to make the morning train, and he felt tired when he got up. Trying not to make too much noise as he left, he pinned a note to the kettle. "Don't forget your Sally, and since you've been such a good girl about this, I'll get you something nice." Mark, even though he was late, instead of driving the 5 miles to the station by road, Mark took the footpath and found he enjoyed the 2-mile walk in still morning air. The station was crowded, and nodding at the odd face he recognized, Mark sat down in the waiting room with a paper. Unable to concentrate on the news or the likelihood of the buyout talks being formally announced today, as his mind was already wandering before he caught the train into London. He was trying to decide what to could buy Sally, because he knew after last night that he wanted her as a permanent fixture in his life, and one way or another he intended to have her. Resorting to type, Mark considered the issue of ensuring that Sally became a permanent fixture like a programming problem to be solved logically. With his collapse and high ground being the #1 selling game on both sides of the pond, Mark knew he was news, and found the idea of using the press to his advantage appealing. The question was how, and the solution came when he was doorstepped at his lawyer's by William, one of the more gossipy business journalists. Fleetingly wondering if Sally would spot the pap photographer who would be lurking about when he was through, Mark found the journo was easy to manipulate. Appearing unguarded, Mark gave William the lowdown on the buyout talks announcement, before adding, "They will be announced officially this afternoon. And now I've got to dash. I really want to get something nice for Sally before I catch the 4.30 home." Mark hid the smile he felt behind his nerd wall when he saw the journalist's eyes lighting up when he said Sally. Catching a taxi to Oxford Street, where Mark knew he would be seen, he made no secret of buying for a girlfriend as he spent. Since the press had informers in every shop, he knew it would quickly work its way to the gossip columnists' desks that he had gone on a 2-hour spending spree in agent provocateur, expensive jewelers, and designer boutiques. Patting himself on the back when he spotted one of William's researchers at the station, he had to contain his desire to flaunt his collection of tastefully garish shopping bags. Calling Sam's mobile once he was on the train, Mark said when Sally answered, "Hey Sal, it's me. Would you mind driving down to the station and picking me up?" "Sure," Sam said. "What time?" "Assuming no delays, 6:15. "Oh, and wear something appropriate, as the buyout talks were announced about half an hour ago and the press might be around." "Appropriate?" "Yeah, as in appropriately feminine and attractive. Sorry to drop this on you so soon, but we may have the press on the prowl. The slimy toad who writes the business gossip column in the mail door stepped me coming out of the lawyer's." "Oh." Mark's face broke into a wide grin when he heard the "oh shit" in Sam's tone. "Okay. I'll make sure I wear something nice." "Informal though," Mark said. "So attractive but informal," Sam said. "Yeah, and?" Mark felt himself blushing slightly as he added, "I was wondering if you'd mind if we exchanged a quick kiss?" No. Not if you think it's necessary." "I think so," Mark said, grinning with a wave of relief. Sam was taking the bait. Having Googled Jenny's press-outed friend at the office, Mark knew why Sam was terrified of the press and intended to use that fear to push Sally permanently into his life, and then his bed. Not for the first time that day, Sam asked himself if he doing the right thing as he pressed the end call button. Jenny seemed to think he was, and said so earlier when he called to tell her that Mark caught him in his bikini. Laughing that it was bound to happen, Jenny listened to the rest of it before saying, "He's got a point about the press, love. There was a thing about Mudguard Games on Sky News. They described Mark as a super geek enigma. He thinks it might be best if I lived full-time as Sally, as he likes to call me." "Sally! Somehow I never saw you as a Sally, honey." Jenny giggled, which is perhaps a good thing. "As for living full-time, what's the big deal? You were living pretty much that way with me." "Well, yeah, but then I always had the option of not bothering." "Well, you can't have the cake and eat it, Sally." Jenny tried the name. "And since you've told me countless times that you envied me being born a girl, what you moaning about? Now you'll have to live like me 24/7. They chatted for a good hour before Sam ended the call, only to be back on the phone to her after Mark had called. Without any preamble, Sam said, "He wants me to pick him up from the station with a kiss and dressed attractively?" "So what?" Jenny said, "Although you've never gone further, you've kissed blokes before, what the big deal?" "They didn't know I was a tranny," Sam flapped. "And this is Mark, not some bloke at a club." "So what?" Jenny said, sounding more impatient than she really was. "I think he fancies me." Sam finally admitted it. "I know," Jenny giggled. "I told you that ages ago. And, if you've got the balls to trust him enough to find out what it's like being a guy's girlfriend, I'm sure you'll make a lovely couple. If it goes any further than that, take it as a bonus you might find you like it, and let's face it, you've never been lucky pulling girls as a boy who likes to be a girl. Why not try pulling a boy as a girl for a change? Heck, I told you years ago that I thought your girly side would eventually lead you into a guy's arms." "Yeah," Sam whispered. "I just never thought it would be my best mates." For a long half-minute or so Jenny heard silence, and then he suddenly wailed, "I don't know what to wear." Jenny smiled. What did he say? Sam had been dressing for himself in the past. Having to dress to tastes of a boyfriend would be a whole new experience for him. Mark said, appropriately feminine and attractive. "Right then, is that black short skirt clean?" She giggled. "It never hurts to show a bit of leg, honey." "Yes. Good, wear that, with a pair of sheer tights, your black boots and that red satin top I bought you. Wear big hoop earrings, evening makeup, and your reddest lipstick is a must." "I'm going to be a bit tardy, aren't it?" Sam said, swallowing dryly. When Jenny took him out in that outfit at Easter, he had men all over him. "Yep." Jenny laughed. "And it's exactly the kind of thing a single guy likes to see his girl wearing when she's picking him up." Her laugh deepened as she added naughtily, "Probably because it gives his ego a boost to show off her off to the other guys and rub their noses in them having a hot babe on their arm. But to get back to business? You say he's expecting a kiss?" "So he said," Sam said, dry, astonished that he was considering going along with this. "Good," Jenny giggled. "Want to have a little fun with him?" "How?" "Well, for starters, you've got to look like you're pleased to see him. Big shy smile as you dash to him when he appears, breathlessly squealing his name, and twine your arms round his neck to give him the kind of long lingering kiss he'll remember." She giggled. "Trust me on this, Sally. Do this right and you'll blow his mind and have him eating out of the palm of your hand in next to no time." Jenny was full of advice, and her last pearl of wisdom was, "You better get started, love, because dressing to impress takes time, and if you're picking him up at 1:15, you've got less than an hour and a half." Asking his reflection as he examined himself in the mirror later, Sam said, "Am I really going to do this?" She nodded back with a faintly mischievous smile flickering on her red lips as she carefully checked for any flaws before answering. Yes. Sally's reflection was subtly different to Emma's, and it was like looking at a sexier twin sister as she turned to the door and picked up his handbag. Sam knew he had to do it now this minute before he chickened out and changed into something that made him feel a little less packaged for display. Unsure if he was insured on Mark's new BMW, let alone the other expensive cars in the barn garage. Sam backed out his tatty 6-year-old Renault Clio and drove carefully down to the station, aware that if the police pulled him, the deception to keep them out of the papers would do the exact opposite. Most of the people waiting in the station car park were clearly local. Sam could tell that from the predominance of blonde ponytails and expensive 4x4s. One car that stuck out a mile was an old Mercedes parked in the shade under the trees where the occupants could not be seen. More worryingly, Sam felt sure he had seen the same car earlier parked in the lay-by not far from the garden gates through the upstairs window. Seeing the car was kind of scary, but Sam knew he was committed, and feeling like his heart was about to burst out of his chest, he slipped out when he saw the train approaching. Cursing under his breath his stupidity for wearing 4-inch heels on a rough surface, he fixed a smile on his face and sedately walked towards the platform exit. He had been dressing in public for years, so why was he bricking it? Even the admiring looks felt different today, and Sam almost froze as he felt eyeball after eyeball running covetously over his body before catching himself and making the pavement. It was one thing to dress like this for a night out clubbing, but now it felt like every bloke he saw was undressing him, and it was not a very pleasant experience. Asking himself what they would think if they knew his boobs came from a medical supply center and what he had tucked in his panties brought a sudden flash of amusement to his apprehension. It was while Sam was grinning at that sudden thought Mark appeared from the exit. He had a semi-expectant smile flickering on his lips as he strolled out clutching numerous shopping bags and his laptop briefcase. Just as Jenny prophesied, the look on his face was priceless, and Sam knew the only way he could do this was to follow her advice to the letter. Smiling at Mark hopefully with the right look of delight on his face, he tip-tapped rapidly towards him, gushing breathlessly, "Mark," barely keeping his balance in his heels. Sam giggled at the dumbstruck look in Mark's face as he twined his arms around his neck. Fluttering his eyelashes, he giggled breathlessly, "Hi," and lifted his glossy red lips to his. Again asking himself if he knew what was he doing, Sam tossed caution to the wind. Now that he had started this charade for a camera that might not even be there, he knew he had to follow it through, and kissed his friend. Stunned for a split second, Mark froze and then dropped his bags and laptop to wrap his arms round Sam's lower back, unable to stop himself spinning them both round in a circle as he kissed him. Taking control of the kiss in mid-spin as one of his arms crept up Sam's back, tracing the shape of the control body under the satin until his hand was pressing on the back of Sally's head. Relishing the sensation of having that slender body held in a clenched kiss, Mark made the most of Sally's unexpected invitation, and then he broke it, loving how Sam's eyes looked up from Sally's breathless face. Adoring the sensation of having her tits, even if they were false, mashed against his chest, he said with a wide satisfied grin as he set her down. "You look nice, Sal. Shall we go home?" Sam blushed faintly and whispered, "Yeah." Unsure that he had found his girl voice first go after Mark's lips' ravaging response to his kiss. Mark nodded, handing him the shopping bags before he picked up his laptop and slipped an arm back around Sam's skirted waist. Hoping that his face only showed a part of what he was thinking, he took a deep breath, trying to slow the array of crazy ideas whizzing round his mind at 100 miles an hour. When he suggested a kiss would be fitting, he expected a peck on the lips in the car at most, and instead he got the kind of welcome kiss that let him have a go at licking Sally's throat. What on earth had got into Sam? Looking up at Mark with a pleased look on his made-up face, Sam regained his composure and twittered loudly enough to be overheard, "How was your day, honey?" Sam was mimicking Jenny's intonation and tone impeccably, and Mark felt like his cock was going to rip his pants open. He barely managed to hide his shock at Sam's surprising welcome. Now that honey comment hit him like a plank on wood on his head, stunning him again into silence. "You," Mark eventually croaked, blushing at the look of giddy amusement in Sam's eyes. "Who, me, sweetie?" Sam giggled. Mark laughed. Deep down he knew most of Sam's behavior had to be an act, but he felt sure that could be changed, and so long as Sally did not rumble that it was Mark who was tipping off the press, he felt pretty sure that constantly having to behave like his girlfriend would turn Sam into her. Once they were back in the security of the car and out on the road, Sam returned to his normal voice and said in a very shaky tone, "God, that was scary. But was that the kind of thing you had in mind for a welcome?" Yeah," Mark said, "in fact more than what I had in mind. But you know, after that little scene you've left no doubt in anyone watching that we're involved. Isn't that the idea?" Sam said, blushing. "God, yes." Mark grinned. "I just didn't expect it quite publicly yet." His tone took on a richer edge, "although I could get used to welcomes like that, especially when you look so sexy, I hope?" Sam said, cutting him off with a blush. Yes," Mark blushed, taking a deep breath before asking, "So what brought that on?" Sam's tone tinged slightly with embarrassment as he said, "There's an old Merc in the car park that was also parked down the lane this afternoon." "Oh," Mark said, praying that his face did not give away his rush of delight. William had done exactly as expected, and fingers crossed Sally's affectionate greeting after the announcement would attract his photo editor's attention. Mark's plans hinged on getting Sam's face in print as Sally as soon as possible because that was the key. Mark knew Sam intimately and knew exactly to get him so deeply involved in living as Sally that he would not be able to get back out. Having got a sexy kiss out of Sam in public, Mark knew it was time to pull one of those levers and said, "This is going to take some getting used to, Sally." "What is?" "Having a girlfriend," Mark laughed, planting the seed for later, "calling you love, behaving like we're a couple and sooner or later kissing and dancing like we're in love." "Oh. Yeah," Sam nodded. "Still we can practice the dancing and the kissing?" Mark grinned. Mark knew Sam's mind was on something else when he did not respond past nodding, and was not surprised when Sally anxiously asked at the turning out of the village, "So you think someone was watching?" "I don't know, probably not." Mark lied. "Unless we were unlucky enough that they already had someone out here sniffing, then there is no way they could have sent someone in car down from London in time to beat the train since the announcement." "Oh, thank God for that," Sam said, pulling up outside the gates, saying with a sly smile, "I guess it's time to get used to playing the dutiful man, and open the gates for me." He giggled and teased, "Honey, I'm sure you're enjoying this too much, Sally," Mark said with a faked growl as he hopped out of the car before he lost control of the ideas spiraling round his head. "A little perhaps," Sam said. "Being your pretend girlfriend for the press looks like it could be fun." Mark let that drop but filed the comment away for later consideration as he waved Sam up the drive and closed the gates. Even though he was bubbling with anticipation and ideas about how things were going with Sally, Mark was surprised to find that he actually wanted to go for a jog before dinner. He had rediscovered that exercise helped him untangle problems and realized that at least part of his programming nightmares on high ground could have been down to him stopping keeping fit enough to playing for Mudguard Games' Sunday League football team. "What time do you want dinner?" Sam said, locking the barn garage door as Mark caught up. "8:30ish if that's all right with you," Mark winked. "Love. We're not in public now, Mark," Sam said primly. "No, we're not," Mark nodded, "but it doesn't mean we shouldn't stay and roll at least until it's something like second nature for you to talk in your girly voice and get used to responding naturally to each other." He knew he was babbling a little and really needed the jog to put the flood of ideas in his mind into some sort of order, but that can wait, Sal. "I fancy a bit of a run first." "Oh. Yeah, I guess there is that spontaneity to get used to." Sam nodded dubiously, reverting to his Jenny-like tone. "And talking of spontaneous gestures?" Mark grinned. "I hope you like my presents." "Mark. You shouldn't have," Sam gasped when he looked at the contents of the shopping bags. "Perhaps?" Mark grinned. "But shouldn't you be saying thank you?" Sam blushed brightly but provided the prompted thank you kiss. He was quite stiff about it, allowing Mark chuckle. "We've really got to practice the kissing so it's relaxed and natural when they happen, Sal." Normally Mark liked things planned, and having his original plan for the night go overboard when Sam's welcome altered everything, he was surprised how successful winging it went. In the space of 30 minutes he had gone from expecting a chaste peck to having Sam's agreement that remaining completely in their respective roles was unnecessary even in private. An hour or so later, wheezing his way along the final stretch of his 5-mile loop back to the house, Mark smiled when he saw an old Merc pulling out of the village. Perhaps Sam had not been seeing things after all. Sam had changed into something a little less revealing, and said over dinner, "You must have spent a bomb today?" He was already wearing the amazing Agent Provocateur basque and it felt marvelous on his body. Tapping the jeweler's boxes, he said, "And then there is this." Sam opened the box and displayed the locket. Inside was just a headshot of him playing Juliet at 15 on one side and on the other one of Mark at the same age. "Where did you get the pictures?" "School magazine," Mark laughed. "Do you like it?" Sam blushed and nodded. "It's lovely, but this stash," he opened the other box, "is tardy." Inside was an ankle chain with a love heart clasp engraved with an M for Mark entwined with an S for Sally. "Yes, but tastefully," Mark nodded. He avoided mentioning the lingerie. There would be time to enjoy that in the future. "And the leather mini skirt and halter top?" Sam said, trying to hide how much he liked them even if he did not have the tits to pull off the top. That's for when I pass my bike test and take you out on a Harley. Mark grinned, having decided to get a bike as much to see Sally in leather as to fulfill a long-forgotten teenage ambition. Mark made the most of the kissing practice, including a long smooch dance to Hey Jude when it came on the music channel playing in the background. Sam prompted the dance when he laughed. Wasn't this the smooch tune all the sporty types used with the girls from Dame Alice's? Yeah, Mark laughed. That first electric slow dance with a girl, he laughed and said with a tease, since I'm kind of feeling a little like I'm 15. Want to dance, Sally? Since Hey Jude is 7 minutes odd long, it lasted long enough for Sam to begin to get used to being the one held, and by the time it finished he had his arms wrapped round Mark's neck, unconsciously nuzzling Mark's neck as they swayed somewhat stiffly to the music. That's something we really have to practice, Mark said, grinning. God, I felt awkward. What about you, sweetheart? He grinned again, adding, that feels really odd to say to you. Get a dance tuition DVD. Sam tried the L word and blushed like a beacon. Love. For you maybe, Mark said. I'm probably going to better serve the cause by not being a proper dancer, as it will make you look more naturally feminine beside me. Knowing that he had pushed his luck a little too much this evening, Mark called a halt to things before he started thinking with his cock, which was twitching with impatience to have Sally. Telling himself that before the end of the year his ejaculations would not be from wanking, Mark kissed Sally goodnight and went to bed early. He knew he was going to have a busy day on the phone, and had a mountain of paperwork to wade through. For someone who was supposed to be avoiding getting stressed, the decision to sell Mudguard was not an exactly a stress-free activity. He had to travel to London 2 or 3 times a week for meetings and signings until eventually it was done. With the ensuing press interest when the deal finally went through, Mark finally got the photograph he had been hoping for in gossip pages of a tabloid Sunday magazine. It was not the front page splash he hoped for, although there was a small picky of him on the cover breathlessly jogging through the village and a headline saying, "What's got into Mudguard, Mark?" Inside was the headline, "The Super Nerd and His Hometown Girl," over 2 large pictures of them taken at the station. One of them was of Sally in his arms, and the other was of her looking up at him with a beaming smile as they walked to the car with her cuddled to his waist. When Mark handed him the magazine saying, "Mary showed me this when I got in today," Sam gasped, "Oh my God." "Just as well you take a good picky though," Mark commented, "and did dress up that evening." "Yeah," Sam said, reading the piece underneath and going bright red as he was described as a leggy blonde who had put the smile back of Mark's face. "Yeah, sorry about that, it was my fault. I told my secretary when she asked why I was looking so cheerful that I had Sally staying, and she must have let it drop when the press were hassling her last week." "What did you say about me?" Sam knew if anyone could blow the whole thing it was Mark's secretary, as she knew him well enough to perhaps recognize him. "Relax," Mark laughed. "When she mentioned that you looked like Sam, I told her you were his cousin." "What do you think? Do you think you can fool her, or would be better off seeing if a little cosmetic help might be in order before she gets to see you face to face?" "Cosmetic help?" Sam yelped. "What do you mean?" "Nothing serious, but I was thinking maybe getting your lips enhanced and perhaps some figure shaping might help before we go out to get seen." "To get seen?" Mark could hear the "Are you mad?" in Sam's tone and said, "Yeah, there are 2 main schools of thought when it comes to dealing with the paparazzi. Try to escape them, or accept it, neither of which to my mind are particularly good solutions to our specific problem. And a cosmetic surgeon would help." "How?" Sam interrupted. "If you let me finish, Sally, I tell you," Mark said, managing to hide his astonishment that Sam had mentioned surgery. "Because there is a third way, where you slowly slip off the map. Obviously you have to give selective interviews, while satisfying the gossip end of the market by being in the kind of places where a pap can bag a sly picture. So long as you keep the impression of domestic bliss, they'll eventually get bored, and so long as you keep your nose clean, and don't attract the wrong sort of attention, they'll start leaving you alone." Mark could not believe it when Sam swallowed his line of bullshit and nodded, asking, "And? So what we do is, Go to places like Monaco for the Grand Prix and other high-profile places and let them bag the kind of pictures of us that we want them to print. Sam nodded again. So far what Mark was saying made sense. But why the knife? Mark secretly crossed his fingers and said, praying Sam swallowed the rest. Because for that to work, you'll have get a little more shapely. If we go somewhere sunny, all they'll want is that golden shot of me and my bikini-clad girlfriend sunbathing on a fancy yacht, which is something we currently cannot give them. Oh, okay, Sam shrugged, seeing the logic of his words. Look, it's just a thought, Mark said, suddenly seeing more of Sam than Sally in the person opposite and reminded him of whom he had to be. That's all, Sally. Taking his time, Mark felt like he had to constantly battle with his cock. Not being able to have Sally now she was so close was painfully frustrating, but he had to allow Sam to get used to being Sally and then Sally used to being publicly his girlfriend. Even so, he helped things along. Feigning exasperation about the unfairness having to keep to his exercise program, while Sally loafed in the garden, Mark ordered a selection of Dancer's DVDs that included one on erotic dancing. He did not have to ask if Sally was doing them while he was at the gym or learning to ride a motorbike. He could tell she was during the regular night out practice sessions after dinner dancing. Some 2 months into the plan, Mark upped the ante and decided it was time to be seen romantically with Sally. Other than the couple of shots in the train station, the only photos of them in the press were shopping or walking through the village hand in hand. At first locally and always picking low-profile places, Mark made sure he and Sally spent as much time as possible together in public. Tipping off the press to these little outings was easy, just a hint to the right people in the right places, which kept the gossip magazines interested. Although nothing like the coverage he had been getting when he had been walking out with glamour models, there was enough to keep Sam motivated. In the end, autumn was well and truly set before Mark felt confident that Sally would not freak out and accepted an offer to one of the River Cottage HQ feasts. Since the autumn weather allowed for less reveling clothing, the feast was perfect to let Sally dip her toes into his world. It would also attract just enough press coverage to have the gossip journalists sniffing when he was seen in a couple of exclusive jewelers the following week looking at rings. After broaching the subject of cosmetic help in August, Mark let the subject drop. He was banking on the restrictions that the artificial boobs made on what he could wear would eventually begin to frustrate Sam, who had, as Mark had hoped, had been pretty much replaced by Sally. The breakthrough came at the feast. The diners were Hugh Fernley Whittingstall's usual eccentric selection of local yokels and media celebs he liked. After the meal, when the drink began to flow and the dancing began, Mark saw Sally enviously looking at a couple of the local girls tarting as they danced, and asked, "What's up?" "I would love to be able to get away with that tiny dress," Sally said with a sad smile. Looking at her, Mark found it hard to see his schoolmate, and although he had heard her say the same about slinky revealing outfits numerous times, this time there was an expectant light burning in her eyes. "You know that can be arranged love, but it might make ending this more difficult," Mark said, thanking the gods for the clamor around them. "Or easier if we don't," Sam said with a really strange look on his face. "Sorry?" Mark said, even though he knew what he wanted and had everything ready. He could not make himself to trick Sam/Sally into going to the next step. Oh, he was prepared to push and tempt, but he could not make the decision for him/her. "Jesus!" Sam laughed. "Do I pick the places? We need to talk, Mark." Ever since Mark mentioned getting him some cosmetic help, Sam had been asking himself if he should bring the subject back up. He felt sure that Mark would willing to foot the bill for a pair of implants, but before Sally could have them, Sam knew he would have to start taking female hormones and formalize his transition. It was not the first time he had considered making the change, having discussed it more than a few times with Jenny since they met at university, and as he played out the pros and cons in his head, it was inevitable that he would ask her advice. Jenny was not very helpful. "I'm the wrong person to ask, Sally." "Why?" Sam/Sally asked. "Because I've always thought of you as a girl. Sure, a transsexual one, but a girl all the same, and in my mind you should have tits." "But I've not, have I?" "Not, but you should," Jenny said, adding, "Not because I think you need to have tits, or Mark wants you to have them, but because you've wanted them since the girls around you began to sprout. Sam nodded. True, I guess? Guess my arse. Jenny laughed. Admit it, you've not phoned for my advice, Sal, but for my approval, which you knew you would get before you even picked up the phone. She let that sink in for a moment before asking excitedly, so come on, fess up, how are things between you and Mark? Recalling the conversation with Jenny, or rather Sally, smiled at Mark and said, batting her carefully made-up eyelashes, would you mind if we left? I've got something I want to ask you, and it looks like tonight is the night. Mark crossed his fingers and steered Sally through the crowds to thank you for the evening, and guided his girlfriend out to the car. Sam/Sally waited until Mark was on the dual carriageway before asking sheepishly, you know, you mentioned I should get a little cosmetic help. What? Mark played dumb for a moment and then said, oh yeah? Well, I've been thinking about it, Sam said, fidgeting in the darkness with anxiety. Mark kept quiet and grunted in affirmative. And Sam thanked God that Mark could not see the blushes on his face. Well, if the offer still stands, then I think I'd best go see a doctor, because they'll insist that I'm on an established hormone regime before they can clear me for a boob job. What's brought this on? Mark asked, adding when he immediately sensed Sally tensing up, but yeah, the offer stands. Tonight, something Jenny said on the phone the other day, everything. Oh, I don't know? Sam said. All I do know is I want a pair of real breasts, and a more naturally shaped figure. Now that he had started, it was like a dam bursting inside Sam as he tried to explain to Mark what he was feeling and why, when he ended with, somehow since you came out of hospital I've come to think that Jen might have been right all along when she teased me about being a transsexual in denial. Wow, Mark said when Sally finally shut up. You have been thinking of it. He hoped he sounded sufficiently dubious because inside he was ecstatic. But if it's the way you want to go, then that's fair enough for me. Thanks, Sam said apprehensively. The only problem is if I have breasts I might not be able to go back to being Sam, or his life. Why would you want to? Mark laughed. I know you well enough to have seen that since you started living as Sally you're nothing like as grumpy, and seemed to be enjoying life rather than tolerating it. For a little while they drove in silence, each alone with their thoughts, before Sam said, yes, no answer, Mark? Could you handle the risk of living with me if I became, to quote Jenny, a chick with a dick? Easily, since you're really doing it to protect my image? Mark laughed, and he blushed brightly and bit his tongue before saying, look, I know a Harley Street doc who's very discreet. Go talk to him, and if you still think it's a good idea, then it's on me. Thinking back over the years, I owe you a lot, and if becoming a girl is what you want in return, then I'll take care of it. Oh, Sam said. Mark could tell something was still eating Sam and laughed. Look, over these last few months I've stopped seeing you as Sam, and when I think about us as kids it's like in my head you've been Sally all my life. Mark debated internally for a split second before adding, hell, sometimes I forget that you being my girlfriend Sally is an act. He knew he was taking a risk mentioning the portrayed public relationship bit. Sam was showing just a little too much this evening, and the last thing Mark wanted was for Sam actually start thinking about how he got here. Mark knew there was one big flaw in how he had tempted Sam into becoming Sally. He could have hired a genetic female to nursemaid him through his recovery. Fingers crossed Mark's alibi should stand up, but given the choice he would rather not have to test it, and said, diverting Sam, so what did you think of a river cottage feast? I cannot believe I've met James Bond. Sam giggled. As Sam chattered, Mark felt Sally taking over. He could sense his friend's body language and speech becoming more feminine as Sally told him how much she had enjoyed herself. Sam was a bundle of nerves and fears when a few days later Mark announced she had a doctor's appointment and would be coming into town with him on the train the following morning. Walking onto a platform full of business-suited people, Sam thanked the Lord that he had dressed business casual rather than his usual hippie chick home look. Hiding behind Mark, Sam felt incredibly vulnerable as they took their seats on the train. What on earth was he doing? The question had not surfaced for a couple of weeks, but now all of a sudden he felt absolutely terrified. Having adored being the protective man for his Sally, Mark was in a rare mood that morning, and said, barely able to suppress his glee as he said, "Relax, sweetheart, you'll be fine with the doc, and I've got a present for afterwards." From his wallet he produced a credit card and said, "Here. This is for you," passing it over. The card said Mr. M. Bright and Miss S. Graham, but before Sam could comment, Mark added, "The pin is your date of birth, and the limit is way more than you could ever spend, so enjoy, and I'll meet you for lunch at Harvey Nick's Cafe around midday." As Mark had prophesied, the interview/examination with the Harley Street doctor went without a hitch, and when Sam left with an appointment for the following week, he was both ecstatic and shell-shocked. The doctor had insisted that Sam signed a deed poll changing his name from Sam Graham to Sally Emma Graham before he was prescribed him hormones. "You're already on a RLT, Miss Graham," the doctor said. "And as such I am prepared to allow you to undergo hormone therapy at the RLT level if you are prepared to complete the paperwork, which in your case consists of legally changing your name and signing the permission for treatment application." Secretly rubbing the inside of his arm against his torso, Sam could feel the plaster-covered lump in his upper arm. He could not believe that he really had embedded under the skin of his right arm a 6-month hormone implant. Agog that it was already leaching into his system, Sam took a little reassurance from knowing that the contents of a single 6-month implant would not be enough to create any permanent changes in his body. Not having been out in London dressed for nearly 4 months, Sam enjoyed browsing round the kind of shops he never would have dared enter a few months earlier. "You've another appointment in a half-hour, Sally, my love," Mark said a couple of hours later, bounding into the cafe and joining Sally at a table at the salon upstairs for a hairdo and makeover to celebrate. "Celebrate?" Sam asked. "Yeah," Mark grinned, "unless I'm wrong about what I think the plaster on your arm means." "Oh, that?" Sally said as if it was nothing important before giggling delightedly. "Yes." Leaning forward, Sam leaned closed and whispered with a blush, "Oh, and well." "What?" Mark smiled. "Before the doctor could give me the implant, he insisted that I change my name. So I'm now officially Miss Sally Emma Graham." Mark could not believe his ears and said with a wide grin as the waitress approached for their order, "That's grand news, that is, Sally." Ordering a pot of Earl Grey and a couple of light salads, Mark joked, "I half expected you to be burgeoning with carrier bags." "Why?" Sally said. "Sally." Mark laughed, "You'll need a complete new wardrobe for your new life suites and still haven't started, or are you the kind of girl who goes round every shop and then buys the thing you saw in the first one?" "Oh yeah. That hadn't occurred to me." With Mark making his presence and ownership clear by walking Sally up to the salon with his arm round her waist, he gave Sam a wink and kissed him before saying, "Off you go, love." He glanced at his watch and added, "I should be done about 5, so be at King's Cross Station Cafe for 1:30, and we'll get the 6 o'clock home?" Mark had obviously phoned in advance, because Sally quickly felt like she was on a production line as a manicurist went to work on her nails, as soon as the hairdresser had cut and colored her hair. Amazed at the talons adorning his fingertips, Sam simply enjoyed having the hairdresser primp and play with his hair, before handing him over to a makeup artist. 2 hours, and 300 pounds later, Sam walked out with his hair highlighted with golden streaks and cut into a fashionable shoulder-length style, and more makeup on his face than it appeared. Telling herself that Mark asked for it, Sally set a course for the ladies' wear department, and quickly racked up a list of purchases before she headed towards the cosmetic department. Making her way round the higher-end shops, Sally ran out of time while browsing for shoes and reluctantly made do with a couple of pairs of heels and a pair of boots before calling for a taxi to King's Cross. Giggling, "Next time I'll arrange things with Jenny," Sally hopped into the taxi and arrived 10 minutes late. Mark was just about to start fussing when Sally tip-tapped into view, holding a mass of shopping bags, wearing a pair of heeled boots that went well with the black semi-formal skirt suit she had worn for her doctor's appointment. The kiss was a perfectly natural perfunctory peck on the lips, as Sally gushed, "Sorry I'm late, love, but I lost track of the time." Since Mark knew there were 2 paps skulking around, he knew he had to sit down and soon, or a lump in his pants shot would be on the cover of something. Taking Sally's hand, Mark drew her to his table and said with a wink, "You look smashing, Sal." "Wow." Sam smiled, blushing prettily with the praise. For a while now she had been aware that sometimes when they danced Mark got a hard-on and suppressed her curiosity. For now,